Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. So today we're unpacking something that honestly so many of us rely on literally every single day, but very few of us truly understand. We're going to explore the fascinating and kind of counterintuitive biology of how your allergy medication actually works once it's inside your body.
You know the feeling? You wake up, your eyes are watering, your nose is just running non-stop, and you immediately reach for that little pill. And it brings relief, sure. But what is your allergy pill actually doing? Well, we're going to take a journey right now, from that outward misery of seasonal allergies all the way down to a microscopic battlefield inside your cells to find out.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the root of allergies, or the hypersensitivity reaction.
So allergies aren't just random glitches. They're actually a very specific biological event known as a hypersensitivity reaction. And sitting right at the exact center of this whole reaction is a specific class of antibodies called IgE. You can kind of think of IgE as your body's highly sensitive alarm system. But, it's one that sometimes gets just a little too panicked about completely harmless things, like pollen or dust or your neighbor's cat.
Now, these IgE antibodies, they don't just float around aimlessly. They strategically station themselves on two very important types of immune cells. You've got mast cells, which live deep in your tissues, and basophils, which patrol your blood. Picture these mast cells and basophils as like overzealous security guards. The IgE antibodies act as their microscopic tripwires. They're just set up, waiting for an intruder to bump into them.
Which brings us to Section 2, the histamine chain reaction, triggering the alarm.
What's truly wild here is the sheer speed and scale of what happens next. It's a rapid three-step chain reaction. Step 1, the allergen enters your system and binds directly to those IgE tripwires. Step 2, those security guards we just talked about, the mast cells and basophils, they go into complete overdrive. They excessively activate. And Step 3, they release massive amounts of a chemical called histamine. I mean, it is literally a flood. They are dumping huge quantities of these chemicals into your system, basically sounding the biological alarm bells at full volume.
We really need to clearly identify the villain of our story here. Histamine. It's a chemical released during these hypersensitivity reactions, and it directly causes the inflammation, the itching, the sneezing. It is the exact chemical culprit responsible for making you utterly miserable during an allergy flare-up.
And we can directly map the complex biology of histamine right to your real-world symptoms. It increases vasodilation and capillary permeability. Sounds fancy, right? But that's just the swelling and the red, watery eyes you get. It causes smooth muscle contraction, which actually narrows your airways, making it harder to breathe. It triggers rampant mucus secretion, hello runny nose, and it stimulates parasympathetic nerves. That's what gives you that relentless, maddening urge to itch and sneeze all day.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, inside the H1 receptor, the microscopic battlefield. Let's zoom in a bit here.
So histamine doesn't just act in a void. It actually needs a receptor to latch onto. And H1 receptors are incredibly widespread throughout your body. They're everywhere. They're in your brain, your heart, your bronchi, your gastrointestinal tract, your vascular smooth muscle, and your leukocytes, which trigger even more immune responses. Because these receptors are located practically all over the place, a single localized trigger can super quickly escalate into an overwhelming systemic allergic reaction.
The mechanics of this are just brilliant. These H1 receptors, they don't hide deep inside the cell. They're membrane-bound. That means they sit right out on the surface, just waiting. And they're coupled to specific signaling molecules called G proteins, specifically one called GQ/11. Think of these G proteins as the internal messengers. The second histamine knocks on the door of the H1 receptor, these G proteins rush off to deliver the panic message straight to the inside of the cell.
And the direct result of that message? A massive spike in intracellular calcium, or Ca2+. This spike in calcium is the ultimate cellular trigger that actually executes the orders. It's like the final domino that falls, directly resulting in the itching, the sneezing, the vasodilation, and all that mucus production we talked about earlier.
All right, Section 4, how antihistamines block symptoms, the game of cellular musical chairs.
Our source material really puts it perfectly here. Antihistamines are the drugs that competitively inhibit the action of histamine on tissues containing H1 receptors. And this brilliantly illustrates the core strategy of your allergy pill. The entire mechanism is based around this one cool concept called competitive inhibition.
Think of it exactly like a lock and a key.
Histamine is the key that fits perfectly into the H1 receptor keyhole, unlocking all those terrible allergic responses. But antihistamines, they act as a fake key. They aggressively compete for those exact same binding sites on the receptors. By sliding into the H1 receptor keyhole first and then just sitting there, the antihistamine occupies it. It essentially plugs the lock, so the real histamine key has nowhere to attach. No binding means no intracellular calcium spike, which means your symptoms are beautifully reduced or even eliminated altogether.
Which brings us to Section 5, Why They Aren't a Cure, the plot twist.
So what's really fascinating here is what your allergy pill is not doing. Antihistamines act by competitively antagonizing the effects at the receptors, sure, but they do not block the release of histamine itself. They only offer temporary relief of the symptoms. Remember those overzealous mast cells dumping massive amounts of histamine into your system? Yeah, well, the drug doesn't stop that factory from running at all. Your body's still absolutely flooding with histamine. The antihistamine is really just temporarily barricading the receptor doors so the histamine can't get inside to do the damage.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating dilemma to end on. If your allergy pill doesn't actually stop your body's hypersensitivity reaction, but merely plays defense at the cellular doors, it forces us to ask, since we can't stop the histamine factory from producing the threat in the first place, is blocking the doors really the best we can do? Or is there a future where we can reprogram those overzealous security guards once and for all? Thank you for exploring this with me on The Explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.